The most dangerous predator in the jungle is not the one that roars. It is the one that wags its tail, because the roar gives you a warning and the roar tells you to run. But the tail invites you in and tells you that you are safe until it is too late. In the modern workplace, we are conditioned to fear the tyrant. We look out for the boss who yells, and the manager who slams doors, and the supervisor who rules with an iron fist. We think that noise is the sound of danger. But there is a more subtle and devastating threat that hides in plain sight behind a mask of politeness and toxic positivity. This is the story of Elias, a young and ambitious analyst who thought he had found the perfect mentor, but instead found a mirror that showed him nothing but his own eventual destruction. Elias worked for a prestigious marketing firm in a building made of glass and steel where the air was always conditioned to a perfect chill and the silence was broken only by the tapping of keyboards. For years, Elias had worked under a man named Mr. Henderson, a classic tyrant who shouted when deadlines were missed and grunted when work was done well. You always knew where you stood with Henderson, because if he was quiet, you were safe, and if he was loud, you were in trouble. It was a hard life, but it was an honest one. But then Henderson retired, and he was replaced by a man named Silas. Silas was everything Henderson was not. He was young and handsome, with a soft voice and a smile that seemed to be permanently etched onto his face. He did not wear stiff suits, but casual blazers, and he did not sit in his corner office with the door closed. On his first day, Silas removed the door to his office entirely and told the team that he believed in radical transparency and open hearts. He brought donuts on Fridays, and he remembered the names of everyone as children, and he never ever raised his voice. Elias was enchanted. He thought he had finally entered the golden age of his career, where he would be appreciated, not just as a worker, but as a human being. Silas would stop by Elias's desk and lean in with a conspiratorial whisper, asking Elias for his opinion on high-level strategy. He would say, "Elias, I trust your brain more than the board of directors, and I need you to help me steer this ship." Elias felt a surge of pride, and he felt seen. He began to work harder than he ever had for Henderson, not out of fear, but out of a desire to please this kind and gentle man. When Silas asked him to stay late to finish a presentation, Silas would say, "I hate to ask this, Elias, because I know how much you value your evenings, but we are in this together, and I really need your magic touch." Elias would stay until midnight, fueled by the belief that he was part of a partnership. He did not see that Silas went home at 5 o'clock, leaving Elias to do the heavy lifting, while Silas took the credit for the team's agility. The trap was laid with velvet ropes. Silas created an environment where negativity was viewed as a sin. If anyone raised a concern about a deadline being too tight, Silas would smile his beatific smile and say, "Let us not focus on problems. Let us focus on solutions, and let us manifest success." He weaponized optimism. He made it impossible to say no without sounding like a traitor to the culture of happiness he had built. Elias found himself agreeing to impossible workloads because he did not want to be the one dark cloud in Silas's sunny sky. The turning point came with the Omega Project. It was a massive campaign for the firm's most difficult client, a client known for destroying careers. Silas called Elias into his office and sat him down, offering him a sparkling water. He looked at Elias with eyes that shimmered with trust and said, "Elias, this is the big one. I am putting you in the lead because you are the only one who understands the vision. I will be right there behind you cheering you on, but I want this to be your moment to shine." Elias was flattered, but he was also terrified because the timeline was unrealistic and the resources were thin. When Elias tried to voice these concerns, Silas patted him on the shoulder and said, "Do not worry about the details. Elias, just trust the process, and trust me, I have your back." So Elias dove into the abyss. He worked weekends and he missed his best friend's wedding, and he stopped going to the gym. He poured his soul into the Omega Project, believing that Silas was clearing the obstacles ahead of him. But Silas was not clearing obstacles. He was building a firewall to protect himself. Every time the client sent an angry email complaining about the direction, Silas would forward it to Elias with a note that said, "I think they are just. Venting, can you handle this for us, buddy?" Silas never put his name on the difficult decisions. He remained the friendly face in the background, while Elias became the face of the conflict. The project began to unravel, not because of Elias's effort, but because the strategy which Silas had vaguely outlined was fundamentally flawed. When the deadline arrived, the presentation was slick, but the substance was hollow. The client was furious. They called for a meeting with the senior partners to demand an explanation for why their money had been wasted. The morning of the meeting, Elias was shaking. He felt physically ill. He went to Silas's office, looking for reassurance, looking for the partner who had promised to have his back. Silas was there, adjusting his tie in the reflection of the window. He turned to Elias and flashed that same unwavering warm smile. He said, "Elias, you look stressed. Take a deep breath. We are going to go in there, and we are going to tell our truth." Elias felt a flicker of hope. He thought Silas was going to stand up and say that the strategy was his, and that the timeline was his, and that the team had done their best. They walked into the boardroom together. The air was thick with tension. The client began to scream, listing the failures one by one. Elias waited for Silas to speak, to intervene with his charm and his diplomacy. And then Silas finally spoke. His voice was calm and soft like a lullaby. He looked at the client with an expression of deep empathy and said, "I completely agree with your frustration. It is unacceptable. We pride ourselves on excellence, and what you have received is not up to our standards." Then Silas turned his head slowly and looked at Elias. The smile was gone, replaced by a look of sorrowful disappointment. He continued speaking to the client, saying, "I entrusted the execution of this vision to my lead analyst Elias, because I believed he was ready for this level of responsibility. It pains me to say that perhaps I gave him too much too soon. I tried to guide him, but there was a resistance to feedback." Elias sat frozen in his chair. The room spun. He could not breathe. He looked at Silas and saw not a friend but a monster who had used kindness as a camouflage. Silas was not taking the bullet. He was holding Elias in front of him as a human shield. The betrayal was absolute. It was not a heat-of-the-moment decision. It was a calculated sacrifice that Silas had been planning from the day he handed Elias the project. Silas continued to speak, weaving a narrative where he was the benevolent but let-down leader, and Elias was the incompetent rogue agent. He did it without raising his voice, without a single drop of sweat on his forehead. He destroyed Elias's reputation with the gentle precision of a surgeon. Elias tried to defend himself, but he sounded defensive and emotional, while Silas sounded rational and professional. The dynamic was set. The nice guy was forced to make a hard decision. 2 hours later, Elias was packing his box. He had been fired for gross negligence. As he walked to the elevator, the office was quiet. His colleagues looked down at their desks, afraid to make eye contact. They were not bad people, they were just terrified, because they had seen how easily the nice manager could kill. Just as the elevator doors were about to close, Silas appeared. He held the door open with one hand. He did not look gloating or malicious. He looked concerned. He said, "Elias, I am so sorry it ended this way. I fought for you in there, but the partners were adamant. I want you to know that I still think you have great potential, and if you ever need a reference for a different kind of role, I would be happy to help." He smiled, a genuine warm smile. Elias looked at him and finally saw the truth. Silas believed his own lie. He believed he was a good man who was just doing what was necessary. He had rationalized his cowardice as leadership. Elias let the doors close without saying a word. As he descended to the lobby, he realized that the shout of his old boss Henderson was a form of respect. Henderson shouted because he cared about the work, and he respected Elias enough to be angry at him. But Silas smiled because he didn't care at all. To Silas, Elias was not a person, he was an object to be used and discarded. The smile was not a sign of affection. It was a tool of manipulation designed to keep the victim compliant until the execution. Elias never worked in a corporate office again. He started a landscaping business where he worked with stone and earth and plants. He worked with things that could not lie. He learned that nature is harsh, but it is never deceitful. A storm does not smile at you before it destroys your house. Years later, Elias met a former colleague for coffee. The colleague looked tired and worn out. He told Elias that Silas was still there, still smiling, still promoted. But the turnover in his team was 100% every 2 years. People entered enchanted and left broken. The colleague asked Elias how he knew when to get out. Elias put down his cup and said, "I didn't get out. I was pushed. But I learned a lesson that saved my life. The lesson is that you must beware of the manager who smiles too much. Beware of the person who is incapable of showing anger, because if they cannot show anger, they cannot show courage. A spine is required to stand up for a team, and a spine is required to deliver bad news honestly. A man without a spine can only slither. We are taught to be nice. But nice is not the same as good. Nice is a behavior, but good is a character. A nice person will smile while they sign your termination letter, but a good person will tell you the hard truth to your face so you can fix it. We crave validation so deeply that we often hand our keys to the first person who tells us we are special. We mistake charm for competence, and we mistake flattery for feedback. But in the ruthless arithmetic of the workplace, the person who is everyone has friend is no one has protector. If you have a boss who never fights with you, it means they will never fight for you. They are saving their ammunition for the moment they need to save themselves. If you are sitting in an office today, under the fluorescent lights watching a manager who speaks in buzzwords and smiles like a shark, take a step back. Look at their actions, not their lips. Do they take the blame when things go wrong, or do they deflect? Do they stand in front of the team when the arrows fly, or do they hide behind the email chain? Do not be seduced by the Donut Fridays and the open door policy. A door that is always open is also a door that lets the cold wind in. Protect your work, document your decisions, and never assume that a smile is a contract of safety. The world is full of wolves, but the most dangerous ones are those that have learned to dress like sheep. They do not have fangs that drip with blood. They have teeth that sparkle with whitening strips. And they will eat you whole while telling you that it is for your own good. Do not be the fuel for someone else's ego. Do not be the sacrifice for someone else's survival. Learn to value the grumpy honesty of the truth teller over the sweet poison of the manipulator. Because at the end of the day, a scar from a clean cut heals, but the rot from a hidden infection will kill you. Be wise, be watchful, and never trust a smile that does not reach the eyes.